Well, it should probably be no surprise that after I put General Hospital at third place, so very, very high, during December, come January 2023, General Hospital did what it's been doing since I started doing these rankings. It squandered all of its potential. Squandered either by the terrible pacing that the show always has, or just constant bad ideas that this show always has. The amateur writing is back again, and I guess we should start with Josh and Dex, because the writing for this semi-affair story that we didn't get any of Cam's perspective until after it's over, basically, has been just terrible writing. And the character of Jocelyn might be the worst character currently in all of soap operas. And like, if you take out any killers, I suppose, on any of these soap operas, whether it's American or British or Australian, you take out any of the killers, Jocelyn's the worst character on any soap opera because of the way she's been written over these past several months, really the past couple of years. Once again, let's run down Jocelyn. I did this, I think, on my last GH video, but we're going to do it again. Because she spent a year giving all of this crap to Sunny and Nina about their affair and how terrible they are, and acting holier than thou about them, or to them, only for her to cheat on her good friend, one of her best friends, and Cam. They've been friends for forever. She cheats on him this whole time and doesn't show any remorse the entire time she's doing it. And then she finally breaks up with him. And then when Cam sees her and Dex together, she tries to say that she didn't cheat on him, while also trying to get him to lie for Dex to save Dex. It has made Jocelyn look absolutely atrocious. She's the worst character on soaps that isn't a killer. And I think a lot of that, well, I don't know if a lot of that has to do with the bad writing or if this was intentional, because like I said in my last video, they started Jocelyn and Dex in the dumpsters together, so we were clearly supposed to see what they are supposed to be. They are supposed to be trash, and Jocelyn has been acting like trash. So maybe this is intentional by the writers, but it would have been nice to actually have some real plot points within this story, and for Cam to finally get a little bit of dragging on her. It was not enough for my liking, but at least Cam wasn't completely weak about it like I thought it was possible with the writing for of this show. But if they could have made it more layered, the writers aren't capable of this. They're just not good writers. But it could have been more layered, because obviously Cam and Jocelyn were having troubles with sex because of the sex tape coming out, and we had a scene months ago that they weren't really having much sex. So maybe the motivation for Jocelyn could have been that she just actually needed some dick. She was really wanting Dex sexually, and that's kind of where they've gone. But the only motivation they've showed for Jocelyn to want to just end things with Cam without no remorse is that Cam was working too much. That's such a weak excuse, and once again, it makes Jocelyn look like a terrible girlfriend, but an even worse friend, and just an overall bad human being. So yeah, the Jocelyn story, it's terrible, and Jocelyn and Dex don't work. Sorry, they have some fans, but not really that many. And I think if they were going for a hot couple together, they failed, because when they finally made love, it wasn't hot. Like, Anna and Valentine, who are 3 decades older than these two younger characters, were way hotter in some of their love scenes than these two. So, yikes. And now, to go along with Jocelyn, let's talk about the writing for Carly and why it's so bad for Carly on this show as well. Carly holding on to this info that Nina was really Willow's mother, even though Willow's dying. Carly basically almost helped Willow die. Like, Carly was willing to let Willow die just to keep the fact that Nina is her mother, because both Willow and Carly don't like Nina. this was a terrible thing for Carly to do, but of course, nobody's really acting like it. There was a moment where Drew was acting like it, but that quickly changed. Because at this point, even though Drew with the recast had potential when he first came back to the show, they've just made Drew basically be like a tumor of Carly's. He's basically just connected to Carly, and that's all he is. He's a yes man for Carly. But why even write these storylines for Carly if she's not going to get any backlash from the rest of the characters? Like, Nina and her got into it, but outside of that, everyone is still acting like Nina is just so bad and Carly is not at all. It makes Carly's stories not just boring, but honestly irrelevant. Like, why are we wasting time on this if you're not going to put in the time to make Carly get backlash from her actions? Like, that's writing 101. But of course, these writers don't understand that at all, I guess. And to make matters worse, they had some dialogue where Willow was basically so happy that Nina was not raising her, even though the mother that raised Willow basically got her sexually assaulted. So once again, terrible writing from an American soap opera where they continue to write victims of rape and sexual assault as it was okay, basically, is what the writing boils down to. Tell me there's no women whatsoever in charge of GH without telling me there's no women in charge of GH, because you could just tell by some of this dialogue. Then, of course, where Spencer and Trina are concerned, we basically went an entire month where they were apart again, and we have to deal with Spencer's idea, because Esme has amnesia, allegedly, that he wants to maybe raise her baby so that Nick or Esme don't do it. I don't want to watch this. I don't want to watch this. And couple it with the fact that they're having Laura and Trina act like just because Esme has amnesia, they can just forget about everything she did. This is just the terrible writing in soap operas over the past 2 decades that doesn't go away. I don't understand how. How do you not learn these lessons over time? That if you try to prop up characters, it actually has the opposite effect, and then most fans hate the character. So they're trying to use other characters to now prop up Esme to try and redeem her with her alleged amnesia. And it's not going to work. It's never worked on soap operas. Look at Peter. Everybody hated Peter. They threw every veteran at him to try and make him more likable, to try and keep him on the show as long as possible, and everybody hated him so much. They should have learned this lesson from Daniel Jonas on Days long ago, where they just propped up that character forever and ever, and by the end, he was so hated by most of the fan base because every other character would just talk about how good Daniel is. I could just see the scenes now in a few months talking about how Esme has changed so much. Ugh. It's worse, though, because Spencer and I think her mother, Trina's mother, Portia, all know that Esme drugged Trina, and they haven't told her yet. It's not clicking why they wouldn't tell her this information. Trina was drugged, but nobody's telling her that Esme drugged her. Why? Is it because the writers want us to forget about that? We're not going to forget about that because of how terrible those cabin scenes were and how they continue to try and basically not give Trina a point of view in her own stories. The story was supposed to be about the Hook, and I said this on one of my last GH videos. The Hook story is supposed to be about Trina, and yet she's not really getting a point of view in her own story, and everybody always keeps info from her. It's dumb. It's dumb. It's bad writing. And if they're going to just put a baby into the laps of Sprina, I don't think that's great momentum for the two couples. February is make or break for me with Sprina because the pacing on this show is just so bad. I can't take it anymore. It's almost to the point where I'm not going to care anymore. And so maybe that's what they want. But I don't know. I don't know because I've talked about the history of soap operas when it comes to black characters and interracial couples and how terrible it is. So it's really making Frank, per usual, look terrible. I mean, Frank's racist. I've said this many times. Frank's racist. But it's making the writers look terrible in the situation as well because they continue to hold this off. But then at the same time, It might just be that they're just so inept at their jobs, because if you look at all these stories and how dragged out they are, that you stop caring about them, or how they just skip interesting plot points like I talked about with Joss and Dex and make them all look terrible with their writing. It's just such a mess on this show. I can't give it any more passes. It's one of the lowest soap operas, and it's all the American soap operas are low now for me. And that's why I've been saying that I don't really want to keep watching the American soap operas. I wouldn't be permanently, but I'm getting to the point where I want to just either vaguely watch them or take a break from them for 4 to 6 months altogether and just have them all be last place in my rankings, because it's what the American soap operas deserve. I'm just tired of the show trying to make things happen that aren't working. The Codys, the Finns, this relationship between Joss and Dex that I don't really understand what it's supposed to be, because they're not hitting the right plot points that they could and should be hitting. So Jocelyn just looks terrible, and Dex is boring as all hell, and so is their lovemaking. So I don't know what we're supposed to be getting out of this show, because they continue to shove things down our throats that don't work, while all these characters and couples with chemistry, the pace is so slow because they don't actually know how to write compelling stories for them. But will they fire the writers? Doubtful.